Today we're focusing on crafting your narrative CV or resume for researchers. This approach to CV writing is rapidly gaining traction in the research community. It's been around in other parts of the world for longer, but it really gained traction in the UK when the UKRI adopted this as its standard requirement in 2021. And then in 2022, the Royal Academy published some guidance called Resume for Researchers. And since then, major funders, including the UKRI and Alzheimer's Research UK and parts of the NIHR, have started to ask for CVs in this format. They offer a refreshing alternative to the traditional CV format. It allows you to showcase your contributions to research and beyond in ways that reflect your contribution to the wider community and about your individual journey, your values, and the impact of your work, rather than just focusing solely on your list of publications or grants. A narrative CV highlights broader achievements, such as collaboration, mentorship, contributions. That's enough of that. The aim of this session really is to help you understand how to approach creating a narrative CV. We're going to explore its key components and get you into the headspace of what you really need to do and the things you can include and the things that you might not recognize you could include and how to include them. Today, we're joined as ever in the salon by two expert speakers who are here to guide us. We have the brilliant Professor Vicki Goodwin, who is an academic and physiotherapist from the University of Exeter, specializing in care of the older people, particularly in falls, fractures and frailty. She was also honoured with an MBE in 2017 New Year's Honours List for services to physiotherapy. And in addition to this, she's an NIHR Senior Investigator and Academic Career Development Lead for the Penn Arc. Hi, Vicki. Joining Vicki on the presenter stage is, do you know what, Emre? We talked about your first name. We didn't talk about it. Emre, we didn't talk about your surname. Emre is a PhD student at University College London in the Spires lab. So that's Sea Hero Quest, right? Yeah, I love Sea Hero Quest. His PhD is focused on integrating science and technology to understand how the brain constructs representations of the world and uses them to remember, navigate, and imagine space across the lifespan. He is also exploring neurobiological mechanisms underlying such processes with the aim of developing tests to help diagnose dementia. Through his PhD, he's been working on developing elements of his narrative CV, and we're going to hear about what he's including in his. So it's great. We've got people at both ends of the spectrum here. We've got PhD student and professor to share their experiences. So whether you're applying for a funding or a job opportunity, or just want to enhance how you present your career, this session is designed to help equip you with some of those tools to craft your narrative CV effectively. I'm not getting my words out very well this morning. Right, and with Vicki, thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. And Vicki, you're going to go first, I think.
I am.
So I will invite you to share your screen, and I'm going to shut up.
Can you see my screen?
Absolutely can. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Adam, for inviting me to come and talk to you today. So you've already had an introduction. So I'm going to come at this sort of 10-minute talk, coming at it as a member of a fellowship, NIHR fellowship panel, where I review people's applications for fellowships and look at their CVs and where they've come from. But I also spend quite a lot of time supporting others in writing this aspect of their application, and I've applied for fellowships myself. And so hopefully this will give you a few hints and tips on maybe how you might want to approach things differently than you may have done before. So when applying for a fellowship, you really need to try and convey to the panel or the reviewers that you are the absolute best person that they want to give you a wodge of money to do your research and to develop your career. But can we actually really convey that sort of information by listing the roles and employment that we've had, the dates that we worked at the University of Exeter, for example, the courses that we've been on? Oh, I've done some training in R, or I've been on a qualitative research course, or how many publications we've got, or the impact factors of those journals that we've published in. Do those sorts of traditional types of CVs really give us that sort of information we need? Because I think that those sorts of CVs really lack that broader context of knowledge, skill, experience and impact that we need to convey as researchers. And also that sort of more traditional approach to CVs really doesn't consider more varied and wider contributions from those who maybe have had quite non-traditional research career paths. So people like me, who was a clinician for many years before I got into research. So the traditional CV doesn't look necessarily so good when I was first starting out, because actually I spent my job in the NHS and wasn't doing much research, but actually I developed lots of transferable skills on the way. So the goal of a narrative CV format was really there to help researchers share those varied contributions in a really sort of consistent and sort of slightly more structured way. So it gave people a real opportunity to share those sort of different circumstances that they had and move a lot away from those sort of performance type indicators that we'd traditionally seen, that can make it really difficult to sort of assess the full range of contributions that someone's maybe made to their field or discipline. So for me, as a researcher who does more mixed methods research, probably tending more towards the qualitative, the traditional CV versus the narrative CV is really a sort of quantitative research approach versus a qualitative research approach. So we're looking at metrics versus experience. And the answer is you really need both, but actually we're going to concentrate more on those sort of more narrative aspects of the CV just now. So here's a screenshot of an NIHR Advanced Fellowship. So that's for people at a postdoctoral level, and looking at the guidance, what they say is what they're looking for. So they're looking for information in that narrative section about research you've led or made a significant contribution to. So it links to those sort of more traditional metrics in the other aspect of your CV. But they're also looking at other relevant experiences, so supporting others and around leadership. And any other skills that might highlight that you're the best person to give what could be upwards of towards £1 million. So they really want to make sure that you are a potential future health and social care research leader. So I'm going to give you some hints and tips and give you some examples along the way. So thinking about your research that you've done. So have a think about what you've contributed in your field. So for example, these are all made up examples, by the way, this isn't necessarily just me. I have led the development of rehabilitation research for people living with dementia. And then follow up with this of exactly what I've done. And you can link that to academic outputs as well. And you might highlight some key skills that you've developed on the way, on your journey so far in your research career. So these could be around methodological skills, technical skills, leadership skills, communication, teamwork. They're all really vital areas for being a good and leading researcher. But think about more than just academic outputs. We do a whole range of different sorts of dissemination type activities depending what field you work in. So it could be things around doing patents or software or sharing code. And think about what role it was that you took in those outputs. Did you collect data? Did you analyze data? Were you the first author on the publication? But also think about other outputs that you've had. It might be conference presentations, whether you're an invited speaker, very important esteem indicator, or whether you were presenting an abstract and any associated prizes that you got. So you can really give this thread throughout rather than just listing things. You can also think about any leadership activities that you've done, and I'll come on to that a little bit more in a second. So here's an example of how you could try and sell yourself. So I have extensive experience of qualitative research methods. I've led the process evaluation on an NIHR funded randomized controlled trial. My role involved collecting and analysing multimodal data through interviews, observations and analysis. My work resulted in 3 publications and presentation at UK and international conferences, and I won a prize for the best oral presentation at X conference. So you can really see here now how you've linked all of those 4 areas together. So we can see your contribution, we can see your skills, we can see the outputs, and you could put DOI links in there as well, depending on the format of your application. But also we can see leadership, you're leading publications, you're winning prizes. So another important area as we develop as a researcher is about developing others. So think about the context of how you develop others. Do you develop others through teaching and learning, whether it's sort of formal teaching or it may be more experiential learning that you offer people? Supervisory skills, mentoring. What did you do, and were there any success stories? Was there any impact of what you did with someone? It's also worth thinking about promoting EDI and that positive research culture. This is becoming increasingly important across all funders nowadays. And so thinking about what have you done in your workplace or with people that you work with that promotes research inclusion and promotes that positive research culture. Okay, so here's an example of what we might see around someone who's developing others. And I've seen these examples on draft applications and also submitted applications where it says, I have supervised 2 students. It tells me nothing. What I'd like to see is I've supervised 2 undergraduates, medical science students in their final year project. I supported them to develop data visualization and writing skills around public involvement and dementia. One went on to present their work at a UK public involvement conference. Again, it's really giving that contextual information so you can see what you have done as an individual to help others and what that impact has had on those people. I'm having trouble with my mouse. Okay, but also we want to know, how do you contribute to the wider society and research community? So you may be involved in reviewing the research of others. So this could be peer reviewing abstracts for a particular conference. You may review for papers for journals. You might sit on a grant committee or review for grant applications. You might be on an ethics committee. You might be a journal editor or associate editor. So all of that includes reviewing other people's research, trying to improve the science there. You may have positions of responsibility within your university or wherever you work, but you may also have external roles, for example, with professional bodies or charity committees or university ones. So think about and describe those roles and what you actually do on that committee. Public engagement is fundamental to all that we do as healthcare researchers. So think about how you've described that and what impact it's actually had and that knowledge exchange. Depending where you're working, you may also be thinking about policy activities and engaging with policymakers. But some of you may be working with industry and actually developing industry partnerships or developing industry applications may be a core part of what you do. So another example is I regularly review manuscripts for whatever journal. And I've recently been appointed as the member of a particular funding panel. I've engaged with policymakers throughout my research and in developing dissemination materials such as policy briefings, which I've presented to 2 MPs and leaders from NHS England. So in summary, when you're thinking about enhancing what you do and really putting yourself on a pedestal and saying, I'm amazing, give me the money, is don't just write a list of things you do. You might start as that as a starting point when you're developing your narrative CV, but really try and give examples and be really specific around the impact anything that you've done has had on publications, has had on other people. So think about it in its broader sense, because don't make the reviewer have to work and to guess. We Google your CVs, we look at your university profiles, we check information, but actually all the information we need should be in front of us in your application. So make sure that you evidence everything. And here's an image from the UKRI guidance to give you a whole range of different ways you can try and enhance your CV in a more narrative way moving forwards. And I think that's my last slide. So I'll stop sharing.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but you're quite quiet, Adam.
Sorry. Thank you very much. Go back on mute, Emre. I can hear your cafe. Yeah, can't hear myself, which I usually can. That was really helpful. Thank you so much. You brought home to me that point about a traditional CV. You would always have done that, wouldn't you? You would have listed off things like supervised students, for example. But it is going that taking that to the next level as well to talk about the impact of what that's done for them or how that's contributed to the wider, which I hadn't picked up on before. Do you think? I've got my question here. Do you see narrative CVs becoming standard across all research sectors, and are reviewers actually taking notice of this? How do you think this balances against that traditional list of publications now?
I think certainly within fellowships, we're definitely seeing a greater move towards that. And it really fits with the sort of research inclusion agenda and EDI. So people from different backgrounds have had different opportunities and may have many more transferable skills that you can only get across in a narrative CV. So I think they're really valuable to do like that. But we also see that sort of thing in job applications where you've got this sort of standard form and then you get to write a covering letter, and the covering letter is essentially a narrative CV where you can actually really try and use those examples where you can give a lot more information. So it's a really good way to try and think about it when you may be writing your covering letter for a job as well. It just might help you structure it in a way that says to the sort of job panel, oh, you want to shortlist me to interview because I've been doing all of these really great things.
Yeah, I can see that. And it kind of, you picked up in your talk about the difference between when you were at an earlier career stage and about having things. And I think actually there's some pros and cons to this, aren't there? Because at an earlier career stage, you are going to have less publications. You're going to have be able to take less credit for grant applications. But there are lots of other things that you can highlight. So that's where a narrative CV can really help you at that earlier career stage. So it's actually not a hindrance that you've got nothing to include. Actually, it opens it up to you having more to add.
I agree. I think those transferable skills that we might have got, I mean, if you're I don't know, in your early to mid 20s where you may have not sort of worked so much, but actually you might have developed team working skills. You might have worked in a care home, for example. So you're actually looking at engaging with people. So there's always things that you've done. Sometimes you have to get a bit sort of creative about your examples on how you reflect the experiences that you've had and how that could be added value for whether it's a fellowship or a job. So I think that's really important. And someone's put a comment in the chat, Mako, is there a guidance according to career stage? Absolutely not. Whether you're applying for NIHR, whether you're applying for like a pre-doctoral fellowship, right up to a research professor, the same applies. You still have to do a narrative CV to actually, you might have more publications, you might have more grants, but actually you still have to sort of convey all those messages around impact, around supporting others, and the sort of wider societal things that you've been doing as well.
I think that also perhaps encourages, I think we know that there are a lot of opportunities for PhD students to get involved in various things. I was talking to a group of people last week that are leading some environmental work in their labs to try and make their labs greener, which of course it's an optional thing. They're passionate about that topic, so they've gone for that, but they didn't do that with a mind for their narrative CV. And as the conversation developed, I said, well, this is also great for your narrative CV. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, well, you can talk about this. You can talk about how you've sat on this committee, how the changes you've made have reduced the carbon footprint of the lab. That shows that it kind of presents you more as this rounded, contributing individual that's good for the research culture, not just as somebody who can win grants or publish papers, which of course are important.
Absolutely. Well, they're just one element of what we do in our everyday lives. We don't all spend our time just writing papers and grant applications. Actually, there's all the other things that we do, which are probably more enjoyable than just writing grants and, and funding applications. My favourite thing is mentoring. I love it. And it can be really informal, where we might literally sit down and have a chat about something, or it might be sort of more formal, and supporting people writing their narrative CVs, because I know that they've done amazing things, but actually it's really hard sometimes to try and sell yourself on paper, really difficult. And I find it hard as well, because you think, like, list all these things, and then I say to someone, yeah, but you've done that and you've done that. Where's that in your narrative CV? And
well, so that raises a good question. So just to highlight, I know that questions are coming in. We will come to the formal questions towards the end. So do keep those coming. I'd love to hear in the comments if you've already written a narrative CV, who already has one. Tell us whether you have or not. Well, I haven't got the option to add a poll, but please do that. How would you, let's say you're tackling this for the first time, you've just seen a job and it says, please include your narrative CV, which I know a lot of people who've signed up for this might be in that situation. How would you start and go about deciding how to identify things to put in, do you think? Vicky, that was for you.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was waiting to see what people said in the chat.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
that's a very good question. Yeah, I think always read the exam question. So if you're applying for a job or a PhD or a postdoc position or whatever, is read the exam question. What are they looking for in that job, and how can you meet that sort of criteria? And it's like, okay, have you done any public engagement? And then you might say, oh yes, I've done public engagement. Well, tell us what, how, really sort of try and qualify that. So rather than a binary yes, no response, is actually say, yes, I've got my own public engagement group. We meet on a regular basis. They've helped me change my research by helping me refine questions, research methods. So you can really sort of go to town on qualifying anything that you say and back it up with evidence.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that some more, but for now, let's allow Emre to give your talk, if you're there, Emre. Hopefully, it's a little bit loud where you are. Oh, and we have a sketchy connection as well now. You're a bit frozen on us, Emre.
Okay.
Would you like?
Give me 1 second. I'll just check my settings.
While Emre's away, I do have some stats. Let's give you a couple of stats to this. Apparently half of UK research funders have implemented narrative CVs in at least some of their funding calls in the last 18 months, particularly, and also international funders such as the Swiss National Science Foundation, the Luxembourg National Research Fund have all adopted national narrative CVs. So this isn't just a UK thing either. This is, and I think they were using it in Europe before we were. We've got you back, Emre. Do you want to try and share your slides? You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Is that clear?
I can.
Right, okay, I'll just share my screen. Perfect, 1 sec. 1 second. Yeah, I'll just get my right. I have to check that with my settings.
Why don't I share your slides? I'll do it for you.
And then, yeah, thank you very much. Thanks. Yeah, sorry, because I recently got a new computer and it's giving me all these new sharing features. So
just tell me when you need me to move them on.
Okay, sure thing. Yeah. So hi everyone. Thank you so much, Adam, for allowing me to be here to share my experiences with you. I'm a third-year PhD student, as mentioned, at UCL with Hugo Spears, and I'm looking at human navigation both in real and real-world settings. And I'd like to draw on examples from my career, because I'm at the early stage, that I hope will be useful to you in terms of how to maybe think about structuring, what to put on a narrative CV, as we were saying, which points to include, and how to go from one point to the next. So if you could change the slide, please, that would be great. So, and then press again, sorry, because there's some, yeah. So the UKRI have tried to define a narrative CV as something that's more of a broad CV, if you like, that's somewhere maybe I try to think of it as between a traditional CV and a cover letter. So it shows your sort of range of different skills and experiences in a way that's, so in the name, I guess, narrative story, like, and maybe makes the reader more curious, or makes them ask more questions about you than a traditional CV would. So it sort of entices them and it creates a dialogue with the reader in a way that a traditional CV wouldn't. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the UKRI have tried to sort of conceptualize this into four key areas, and I've tried to come up with ways of redefining these areas. If you just press this slide, that'd be great. Yeah, so the first one, so yeah, these are 4 areas. The first is core motivation and hard skills. So on the following slides, I'll give examples from my PhD with regards to applications, with regards to what each of these mean and examples of them. But I try to think of them in this way. So core motivation and hard skills. So why am I doing what I'm doing? And what are the actual, what's the actual training or degrees that I've undertaken to get from where I began to where I am now, and then contributions to wider academic settings, so not just in your home lab, but beyond academic facilitation, transferring skills in different labs, different unis, different environments, different people, colleagues, projects that have helped you get to where you are now and will help you tell your story and convince somebody reviewing your application to allow you to get where you want to get. The broader society, I try to think of that as, why does my research matter? Why do I actually need this fellowship or this grant that I'm applying for? How is it actually going to help me make an impact or have a difference on somebody? Because that's the idea. And also there's the sort of, as we mentioned previously, the softer skills, such as teamwork, and hard skills as well, that are maybe outside the academic setting. And so how training in other areas of your life, such as hobbies, how that might be written about in a way that showcases, gives you the best pitch. Next slide, please. Sorry. Oh, yeah, so core motivation and hard skills. So I extracted the sort of the opening sentences of my PhD applications, which this is from one of the ones that I was successful in getting, the one I'm on now actually, the Eco-Brain program. And when I was writing this, I was very much thinking about how I can tie together my experiences. So the first ever BSc thesis, my first ever entrance to the field, all the way to where I am now and what I actually want to get out of a career in neuroscience. So I, in the first sentence, I mentioned discovering the potential of using virtual environments. And I've also mentioned that a key limitation of this experimental design. So I've immediately tried to mention where a caveat might be in terms of the skills of what I was learning and how that could be used, how overcoming that caveat would help me get to where I wanted to get to, and why that caveat has actually motivated me to go further into the field that I'm working in now. So actually mentioning inherent limitations to the environment you're working or the skills you picked up, or understanding early on in your narrative CV, highlighting a gap and saying, this is what motivates me. You can make it very clear to a reviewer or reader why you actually want to do what you want to do, or what it was that actually is really driving you. And if they understand your core motivation, they can understand better if it aligns with their goals and the program that they're offering you the place on, or the skills they're looking for. So by doing this, I'd recommend making it clear to them why you need to do extra research. And then in the last sentence, I said about biomarkers for dementia. So I've rounded off by saying this is the final career aim. In 10 years' time, if I have my own lab, this is the kind of thing I'd be looking at, basically. So you're saying, so what is the big picture, and what's the key theme that you're interested in researching? If you could press on the slide, that would be great. Yeah, so when did you first realize your motive, just summing up that, and then what limitations do you want to overcome? And then if you press once more, and how will achieving your goal progress the scientific field? So in essence, why do you need to do what you need to do? So at the stage we're at, there aren't really many effective biomarkers. I mean, definitely not at the digital level or the cognitive level where we can really understand fully the individual differences in cognitive behavior. So I was very motivated by that, as I mentioned here, and I'll talk about seeker request a bit later as well. But that's one way which the tool has allowed me to align with my motivations. So I also mentioned other experiences I've done. I tried to tie them together. So in the Max Planck Institute, I look at ecological assessment, so I could look at how interaction in people with autism was altered, and I've highlighted here what these experiences made me aware of that I wasn't previously aware of. So one thing you might want to do is say what has an experience allowed you to learn about a field that you didn't previously know, or how has it changed the way you see a particular field? And if you can show that you can take a different perspective of something because of an experience, and you can reframe something in a constructive way, that can show somebody that you're able to learn from an experience and apply it to a different context. And I've also mentioned here using a mobile app during my MSc thesis. So I've tried to show not just the wet lab skills, but also that I had an innovative, maybe different approach to looking at a scientific problem. So using examples where you can show that you haven't just used the classic brain scanner or pen and paper tasks, but actually where you've used a novel approach to attack a big scientific problem that's been meaningful. That can also be a good way to showcase your repertoire of skills. So if you just press on the slide, that'd be great. Okay, yeah, so how are these experiences different, unique, how are they complementary? So you can think very much about when you're actually wording these sentences, what should come first, what is the key theme underlying them? So they're all basically trying to understand what the mechanisms fundamentally driving disease are through different approaches. So through looking at ecological measures, basically, but they're different in respect to the populations, the exact techniques used, the questions being answered, but we're trying to kind of encapsulate them in a key theme. If you can get a key theme going throughout the sentences, that's going to help the reader reinforce in their minds what exactly it is you want to do and what you're talking about, and help them remember your application better if they can form a better memory of the story you're trying to tell. If you could go to the next slide, please, that would be great. Contributions to wider academic settings. So a couple of years ago, I went on a voluntary internship to the Max Planck Institute in Munich, and I worked for 3 months looking at social interaction in autism. So eye tracking measures, gaze, how people with autism might interact differently, how they might cooperate differently, and how doing that might be a way in which we can help people understand how we can better help people with autism with social interaction in everyday life. So how is their attunement to each other different from them with a non-autistic person without their diagnosis? So how might their miscoordination be useful to us as a scientific field? So I went to a different country, to Germany, and the collaborations I made with these people, they're still ongoing now. They're still writing not only references for me, but sharing ideas, sharing new papers, new ideas, new theories, new technologies. This was an eye scanning technology that I'd never used before. It was a completely new experimental design. So hyperscanning is a very novel thing in the literature in general. So it allowed me to take away not only technical novel skills, but novel knowledge. The people I worked with, the Max Planck, Leonard Schulbach, and Dimitris Bollis, both developed this novel theory of autism being a misattunement hypothesis rather than something at the individual level. So it's more about the dyadic level, and developing these novel theories with them was a great way to showcase that I'd studied with someone who was at the frontiers of their subject and who could pass on new ideas to new generations. So I think when you're taking up skills and your opportunities, definitely travel abroad to show that you can broaden your horizons, deal with people from different cultures, different research environments, but also go to people who are really at the front or novel in developing the concepts they're developing, because that will show that you can learn from the people who really know how to drive the field forward, and that can be passed on to you and can showcase your skills. So yeah, if you could press the slide. And so yeah, what have international experiences given me? Okay, and so I also went to America. So in this last year, I took on a fellowship for a couple of weeks at Caltech with Dean Mobbs, and I got to very much understand how computational mechanisms could be applied to what I was studying, but also he has collaborations with industry. So I got to learn about how industry collaborations and how big game data could be useful for scientific experiments. So citizen science, he's currently developing a task where they're looking at fear and emotion and cognition, how they interrelate, and how they can look across the population and look at individual differences in this behavior. So often these taking on summer schools as well. So I went to summer school at Dartmouth College of Computational Neuroscience, applying high computational approaches to social neuroscience, which I'd never done before, never had any insight into. So taking on showing that you can take on completely novel skills and form these long-standing collaborations. So even to this day, I'm collaborating with people from the summer school, asking them for new ideas that they've developed from their research, what they think of a particular theory, or how they would approach something with the tools that they have and their speciality. And the work-life balance as well, other aspects of academic life. Having experience can really shape the way that you see your work-life balance, the way that you think about academia as a field, and it shows that you're open to different ways of living as an academic. So I definitely, and so so how the people I met aided my research path and vice versa is something to think about when you're including this in a narrative CV. Next slide, please. Next. So broader skills and experiences. So I asked ChatGPT to write a word cloud of the extracurricular activities that I've been engaging in over the last few years. And one of the things that I do is play the cello, and I also sing in 2 choirs. So music has been a great part of my life, but it's also shaped me as a scientist, not only directly by allowing me to think more creatively, because music has that sort of procreative effect on the brain, but also the manual dexterity that I have, coordination from playing the cello, that's helped me with running science experiments or using fiddly technology. The orchestra has allowed me to develop teamwork, to actually listen to other people in the choir. So choirs, you often listen to other parts that are singing with you, so you have to be coordinative, you have to be sensitive, you have to be able to blend in with other people. So all these skills have things that I showcased as helping me as a scientist, where you're often in big co-authored teams with different people from all around the world, and you have to be able to show that you can listen, respect, take on board what other people's views, opinions, and also coordinate something to produce a cohesive end result. So a paper, or in the choir's case, a performance where everyone's singing the right notes, the right time, and the correct blend of different voices. Also founders, so entrepreneurship. Yeah, so entrepreneurship is something I took part in a hackathon a couple of years ago, and that was during the lockdown. So I had to make use of different people's skills to try and create a cohesive pitch presentation. And this was for an app that actually could tackle dementia using walking patterns. And taking part in hackathons, I would also recommend as a great way to meet other people in different scientific fields who use different approaches and ways of answering scientific fields. So you're always going to bump into someone who's in software engineering, for example, or who's looking at the business model side of commercializing technology for science. And through these people, you can learn so much about yourself and your own experience and see, because it shows you what you're lacking in terms of research, technologies, who you would need on your team, who you need to work with. So why does my research matter is the final thing. So when you're rounding off a statement, you want to say something like, okay, so go back to the question, why should anyone care? Why is it so important? And what I said, one of my statements was, because getting lost in familiar environments could be the earliest sign of Alzheimer's disease, applying these new models will be essential for understanding why individuals are at greater risk of the disease. So we're basically tying back to why it's meaningful for society as a whole. And I've said also large cohort data sets like CHO Request, which I'm working on currently, would benefit from the application of X, Y, and Z. So you're saying where the gap is, and you're saying what your tools would need from somebody else, or the application you're applying for, why that would be helpful to the tools you already have, and how those things, when they come together, create an even better outcome. So you've got to always try and tie your narrative into what you already have to give. What do I have to give, and how will what I'm going for improve that even more and supplement what I already have? So yeah, think about giving. What do you want back? So what do I have to give? What do I want back? And how? And what about my story shapes what I want to give and why I need what I need. So yeah, so and why do I need this next step exactly? So our lab in London is looking at a lot of our work is with taxi drivers. I'm sure some of you are aware of the famous taxi driver studies that my supervisor was involved in. So we've never used real world measures with these taxi drivers. So we've never used See Her Request with them. One of the things we're now currently doing is looking at See Her Request in these drivers, so we can see how everyday, sort of over time, how navigation ability in their sort of everyday lives might tie into their taxi driver brain. So actually saying why would what I'm going for be useful and allow me to bridge a gap in some respect way. So this is going to bridge the gap between fundamental neuroscience and everyday behavior. So I think that's the final thing to think about, is which gap am I bridging? Yeah, but yeah, thank you for listening to everything I have to say.
That's all right. Thank you, Emre. I think I mean, what you pick up there is you get some great examples of how you draw upon your lab work and your research to bring those into your narrative CV, which is clearly, that's the whole point of this, isn't it? I don't know if you agree, Vicky. It's going beyond the research, and also as well, something that even you were doing in your slides, Emre, which I was going to pick you up on, is you talked a lot about the we and the lab doing things. And I do feel that in the narrative CV, you've got to bring it back. It's quite hard. And we've talked about this, I think, in building your a CV salon before, about making it about you, about taking credit, which is quite hard, particularly in the UK. I feel like we're a bit modest. Even now, I do the same thing. Dementia Researcher is fundamentally me. It doesn't employ anybody else. But every time I give a talk, I say, we do this, and it's not, it's me. So
it is, because it's team science. We all do team science. There's generally no I. But when you're applying for a job or applying for a fellowship, it's all about you. So you might work in a team, but you have to really clearly say what bit you're contributing to that team. It was interesting in the chat, someone put in about having a group narrative CV, which I've never heard of.
Wow, yeah, that's, well, I suppose
that's
when you're
a whole different level.
when you're applying for a big grant, I suppose there's an entire lab with a leader. You've got to
maybe, yeah.
I'm gonna try and see if we can jump to a couple of these questions. Emre, I'm just gonna put you on mute if that's okay. Your
Sure.
cafe note. There we go. It's a little bit quieter. Well, there are a couple of questions here which I think are particularly good. So somebody asked, and this is one for you, Vicky. How can we translate, or how could somebody translate their NHS clinical experience into a narrative CV if they're applying for a doctoral clinical academic fellowship?
Brilliant question. I think one of the things that you've got lots of public engagement experience, because you're seeing patients on an everyday basis. But actually, you may well do leadership activities within your clinical work. You might be on working groups. You might lead a team, or even you might just line manage one person. You might have students. So actually you're doing work there in terms of developing others, thinking about the greater good as well. I mean, I don't know what your professional background is, but actually there may be opportunities. I mean, when I was applying for my doctoral fellowship through NIHR back in the day, I was involved in some national physio groups in our professional network for physios working with older people. So I was doing that without even thinking about an academic career at the time. It was just something I wanted to improve patient care. So there's different ways you can maybe get involved with. And actually, back then, everything was in person, but now there's many more opportunities to engage with people, engage with opportunities online as well.
So I suppose, I mean, if you're right now kind of trying to reflect upon what you do day in, day out, or what you've done in the last month that's kind of maybe not even above and beyond your job, but just thinking about the activities you've done. If you do find yourself coming up a little bit short and are faced with doing this, then that perhaps is the push to say, okay, I'm going to go find something to do to put into my narrative CV. And Dementia Researcher is one of those ways. I know that we have bloggers and podcast guests and contributors, both of you. Emre, as of today, you can say that you've delivered a webinar on building narrative CVs, which was attended by this many people. As a result, they would have been better prepared for submitting next future grant applications. I think contributing in that way, so you can always do stuff for us as well. But I think there are lots of opportunities. You have to just go out there and find them if you're looking for things to build.
Yeah, another thing for someone applying for a decaf, journal club in your little team, whether it's multidisciplinary or I don't know if you're a physio in your physio team, is set up a little in-house journal club where you're sort of reading research as well. Because if you can say, I've set this up for my team.
And you can do that on our platform. If you can't,
exactly.
If you've not got
plug.
It is, because we had a journal club meeting last night that was very poorly attended. If you'd like to start a journal club, we can help you make that happen. And that would be a great thing to include on your narrative CV. And all of these things, I think, as we've said, are making funders kind of think beyond and say, right, they've written 2 publications, but clearly they are busy because they're doing all this other stuff that just makes them a great person to have around, a good investment of somebody who is worthwhile funding. And you can include in that presentations as well that you've done. If you, even if you just help somebody, if you're one of those helpful people in the lab or in the team who provides guidance to others on certain research methodology, or you've done any teaching, all of these things can be added in here. It's about how you contribute towards that wider environment. We've got another question here, which asks, is there a template that you'd recommend, or is it dependent on the format of the application?
Great question, Donna. No, I think is depending where you're applying to, look at what they specifically ask for in that application. So the last person asked about doctoral clinical academic fellowship. So in the guidance that goes along with that application, they'll specifically say, this is the format that we want you to use for this application. If it's applying for a job or somewhere where it's a cover letter that's a bit more generic, you might want to sort of think about structuring it. For example, using some of those headings that are used in the presentation, or look at some of the guidance documents from fellowship applications to give you an idea how to structure it. Always, if there's no template, just look elsewhere and see what other templates other people have used for other applications that you can think, oh, okay, that would be a really good way for me to structure my application.
I think, as Emre picked up on, the UKRI and Royal Academies do both have templates. So if I mean, they are the most basic of things, though. So if you think about this, so as take your traditional CV, your 2-pager with your publications, and what you're adding to that is they have their template includes, the first section is personal details, so it's about you, and that's where you can bring in Emre's example of kind of, I don't know, being in an orchestra, or about you as a person. I think always good to include fundraising and charity efforts. Volunteer work is always good in there as well. Maybe, as Emre said as well, why you're passionate about this subject, why this is important to you, any history about what brought you to this particular topic, I think is always compelling. Particularly charity funders, I think, like to see that you have a personal connection in some way. Their CV goes on to their next section is about how you've contributed to the generation of knowledge. So that is kind of going beyond your research as well, but what you've done to this field, how you've managed that. The next module is about contributing to development of individuals. So back to your being a mentor for other people, but it doesn't have to be formal. So if you don't have, I know a couple of our audience members won't have formal teaching responsibilities. However, if you are a supportive colleague that has shown people how to fix their code, you're that person, or you're the person that shows you how to apply a training method, or even if you've contributed to a webinar like this, those are exactly things for those development opportunities. Then they go on to contribution to the wider research community. So again, presentations, writing blogs, the things you might do in that. And then they're finer on this contributed to broader society. That's where you can do your PPI piece and sci-coms particularly, and then anything else you want to add. They have the final section is additions, but I will post a link to that in the chat notes as well. And how long should it be is a question. What do you think, Vicki or Emre?
Again, look at the guidance. Sometimes I think someone put in the chat, so it might be 1,000 words. So that's what you've got to play with. It might be 2 pages, it might be 4 pages. So make sure you fit in and start with everything, and then you may have to trim it down a little bit if you've got too much, and think about those really key examples that make you shine. And sometimes someone asked the question in the chat, or I responded saying it's always really good to let other people look at your example that you've written, your narrative CV, because they may well know things that you've done and say, where's this? That isn't in there, or actually you've not given a really clear example. And I mean, when I've written them before, someone said, oh, take that out, that's not interested in that. So it can be a really good way of actually sort of developing that sort of iterative process to really look at how you sell yourself.
I think once you've start with everything and then take out the duplications and those other things, and as we've said, do seek out those opportunities for stuff that will add to your narrative CV these days. I'm going to finish up because I'm really keen that there are still quite a lot of people watching. I'm really keen that we do get a chance to jump across in the chat, because I've got a bunch of links that I want to share as well. I wondered, have either of you come across any particular resources that you find would useful in your preparation for this?
I mean, UKRI and Royal Society is a really good place to start for things like that. But I mean, I've found presentations other people have done on this exact topic in obviously a different context to dementia, maybe international. So it's just worth having a look around. But look at, if you're applying for a fellowship, whether it's charity, whether it's NIHR or UKRI, look at the guidance document. That's the key resource, because then you can make it context specific to that particular funder.
I contacted the R&D team in our university as well, and the research culture team to say, and they actually had, when I looked down the list, there's I don't know if this is, I'm sure it's not just a UCL thing, but there's kind of a big long list of pre-recorded and upcoming live training sessions, and there were multiples in there on Resume for Researchers as well. So I think your own institution as well might have something there that would be useful to you. We did a great podcast on this topic. It's quite a while ago now, but I think it's still relevant. We had somebody from the Netherlands, from Bristol, and from the NIHR who, because the NIHR have done some research on this. They did a review of how it's used and how it could be useful, and I got the author of that paper to join us as well in that podcast, so I'll post a link to that. So I'm gonna finish up. I've got some final takeaways. These were my thoughts on this topic. So top 10 tips for creating your first narrative CV. Please jump in if you think I'm wrong. So number 1, focus on contributions. Highlight the impact of your work on science, society, and collaborations, rather than just on listing your achievements. Talk about those, and if you've helped somebody else, make sure you add the detail. Tailor to the purpose. It doesn't make a narrative CV isn't something that you would just still use the standard copy and paste no matter what job you're applying for. Still do think about the specific funding body or the role you're going for. So if the role you're going for has got lots of public engagement in it, for example, or specifically mentions public engagement, make sure you've got that in your narrative CV. If there's no mention of public engagement, by all means mention it, but don't make all your narrative CV about public engagement. Tell a story. You use clear, concise language to describe your career journey, focusing on motivations, milestones, and future goals, which is what Emre talked about brilliantly in his talk as well. Highlight interdisciplinary work, showcase collaborations across the field and how they've enriched you. Everybody loves seeing that you're somebody who is used to working with others and is a good team player. Include public engagement, so reflect on outreach activities, science communications, working on stakeholders. If you have nothing to include right now in your CV on that topic, come and talk to me. I can provide you with hundreds of opportunities to be on podcasts, to write blogs, to present in the salon, or to come and talk about your work on the platform. Demonstrate leadership, so mention committee roles, conference organization, any initiatives that you've led, fundraising opportunities. Showcase challenge and adaptability, so include examples of how you've overcome obstacles particularly and how they shaped your skills and approach. Quantify impact, which I'm not going to add detail to that. I think we've talked about that. And it's finding a balance between professional and personal, I think, is the tricky thing. So by all means, maintain professionalism while letting your enthusiasm and personality kind of shine through into this. I'm going to leave it right there and thank my brilliant guests, Professor Vicki Goodwin and Emre Yavuz, who's going to... sorry, I should have asked you for the pronunciation before we started. This has been great. Thank you all very much for joining. We're going to join you in the chat now, and I'm going to share some links that hopefully will be useful. Thank you very much. And I've got some slides.
Thanks, everyone.
I didn't line up, which I will get ready now. Thank you.
assuming we can just leave now.
I guess so. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Bye, Emre.
Right, bye-bye. Nice to meet you.